Welcome to Season 4 of Under the Sisterhood, Women's March for Mental Wellness. This season, we're diving deep into the intersection of women's mental health and overall wellness, bringing you thought-provoking conversations every Friday. We'll explore a wide range of topics, including how mental health impacts every stage of a woman's life, the intricate connections between physical and emotional well-being, and the role of practitioners who champion mental wellness. This podcast celebrates women, their resilience, and the incredible contributions they make to our world. I'm Elizabeth Elfenbein. Let's get under the hood. Today, we're getting under the hood with Leslie Coplin, a mother, daughter, sister, women's advocate, and a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist employing warmth and humor to support clients with thoughts, behaviors, and relationships that hold them back or make them feel stuck. Her client-defined approach identifies goals, insights, and untapped resources to feel better and create change. Until 2023, she was Outreach, Engagement, and Training Coordinator at YWCA Greenwich Harmony Project, supporting survivors of intimate partner violence. As a certified domestic violence advocate and trainer, she educated medical and behavioral health providers, educators, law enforcement, beauty professionals, and attorneys to recognize, respond, and refer people experiencing relationship abuse to support services. Leslie's primary prevention work taught young people to navigate unhealthy relationships and practice skills to foster healthy ones. She created content around protective factors throughout the life cycle, including practical parenting, gender stereotypes, elder abuse, and loneliness. Leslie also helped launch YWCA Greenwich's DEI initiative, delivering interactive workshops for nonprofit organizations. Her lifelong passion for communication, strengths-based approach, and a lens of cultural humility informs her work in mental health. She holds a BS in Communications from Emerson College, an MSW from Fordham University, and studied improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade. Prior to her career in mental health, Leslie worked in television production as an NBC page, talent assistant for David Letterman, and associate producer for The Ricki Lake Show. Wow, welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. It's like, this is your life, Leslie Coplin.
Oh, I'm so excited. We are beginning our Season 4 Women's March for Mental Wellness, and I'm thrilled to be getting under the hood with you today. If it's okay, I'd love to get going. I'm curious, Leslie, having come from production and media, what was that inflection point that got you into the mental health and wellness space?
First of all, I just want to say once again how happy I am to be here. One through line is communication and conversation, and there's nothing I like better than, I love small talk, but I also love big talk. I love having meaningful conversation about meaningful things. And this was a little bit of a this is your life experience for me when you asked me about the inflection point, because I really had to connect the dots. You know, we don't often look at our lives. There's this great quote, as you live your life, it's kind of appearing like a series of random events bouncing you from thing to thing, causing this situation or that. And later when you look back, it's like a finely crafted novel, right? So there is a through line in all of our lives, and mine has definitely been communication. And that started out in the performing arts and then television production. Then honestly, being a mother was very creative. It's the most creative thing you can do, right? In some ways, you're creating humans, right? Hopefully good ones. I had two inflection points. I was thinking about this. One is I had been a stay-at-home mom for a while, and I decided I wanted to start thinking about going back to work, but television production didn't really work for my work-life balance. I had none when I was in TV production. And so I started to get interested. I was always interested in fitness, so I became a personal trainer. Once again, didn't think of it. It really wasn't about the how many sit-ups. It was about the talking and the listening, the empowering, And then I had back surgery. I had an emergency spinal incident, and I was like, gee, I can't do that anymore. And that moment kind of taught me to lean into, I was 40, almost 40 when it happened. So I did some things that were pretty impulsive. I got a puppy and I cut bangs. Never a good idea in that kind of moment. But I also started thinking, if I could do anything, what would I do? So I started to go back to my roots, and I did theater and improv and loved it. And then I went along the line of that, but it was more about the auditioning than it was about the performing. And I was like, what else am I interested in? And I had this moment where my kids, I have two kids, and they're both were interested in theater. They were in this crazy local production of Les Mis that ended up being an incredibly expansive thing. My son was tiny. He was Gavroche. He had never done theater before. My daughter was Madame Thénardier. And all the moms, it was a new local theater. The moms were kind of pulling together, putting the carpet down like the day before the show opened. And I saw my kids up there. And obviously the music of Les Mis is so inspiring. I just started sobbing. And I was like, what is happening? Because I'm very much about what is going on and how can that inform what I do next. And what was going on was I was like, oh, this is what I've been doing for the last 18, whatever. They were 13 and whatever. And I was like, and I've done that pretty well. And whatever I won't do next, I want to feel this way about this dedicated, this passionate. And I took human behavior in the social environment, master's of social work class. I called it my pottery class because I didn't want to commit or say I was getting a master's and from there, everything came. The long answer to your question, but the career in mental health is also unfolded like a good story.
When we think about going and dealing with people and the relationships and all of the challenges that go on, that's going on to the inner world. And so
yes.
As you go back for your master's in social work, first start and share that experience. What was that like?
When I went to social work school, it felt like it was giving theory to things that I had always intuited. I was a very relational kid. I was brought up in a household where we talked about everything a lot, had to get a word in edgewise, and also, feelings and human stories and, from gossip to entertainment, stories were very important. But all of a sudden I had all these theories, these relational theories, these systems theories, right? And so it was able to put into practice things that I believed. Also, social work, I chose it specifically. There's a wide range of mental health practitioners, but social work really focuses on strengths. The focus is strengths-based. So we're looking for the positivity. I've always been a positive person. I mean, try not to be toxically positive, but look for the beauty, look for the what is going right in your life. What are your resources? Things like that. Also, it's considered to be person and environment. So less the medical model of you are depressed, but you are depressed because what are the challenges in your life, both culturally, right? Historically, what is the emotional inheritance of your family, generation to generation, the burdens that you're carrying, to challenges with housing, challenges in relationships. And then, that cultural humility to consider that in every situation. I can't purport to know anything about someone else's life until they tell me. So I'm really going to listen. That's kind of how it happened for me.
And I think, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, you made that comment just sort of shyly about toxic positivity, because I think I never knew that about social work, that you look and you come from a point of strength. So, as you are going through this whole process, talk about what that looks like from a social worker's point of view, and then your experience.
Like I said, I tend to be a positive person. I don't really have any theory behind this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. There's a lot of discussion, as I said, of emotional inheritance and intergenerational trauma, and I'm a Eastern European Jewish woman. And, there is that whole legacy of survivors of the Holocaust and how that's passed down. Well, my family was already over here. So there was that feeling of like, aren't we lucky, right? We are so lucky. And that's positive, but it can become toxically positive. And I think why I was so attracted to social work is because just the same way, we're talking about entertainment, my favorite, I love documentaries and I love movies where kind of dark things happen, because I was very drawn to the let's be real. We don't always have to be positive. When something stinks, we can say it stinks. When something's hard, we can say it's hard. But also in social work, you're using your belief in them that they can change. You're trying to be, lend them your, ego strength. So you do have to have some sort of belief in the human spirit and identify what a strength is for them, right? And once again, it's not going to be necessarily what I would consider to be something that I lean on, whether it's some sort of faith or some sort of hobby. I mean, for some people, we've talked about walking, we've talked about, animals, or whatever it is that is a strength to you. We can identify the problems, but let's start to identify the solutions as well.
That's really interesting. And I think it's interesting just leaning into and feeling your patient or the person you're sitting across, trying to really support. And, I think it's also interesting what you said, Leslie, in terms of our cultural backgrounds and where we come from and the effects of that, which I would imagine, I mean, we can share our stories as we are, but like we all have backstories. And
exactly.
And I think that to your point of that being what makes you really positive, I think it's just really interesting. I'm sitting here with it. It's a lot to take in and a lot to really unpack, because if you go deep with it, there's a lot of different, it's not just beliefs, it's really about feelings. I'm kind of curious actually to that point with social work, the feeling space. Do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Well, you said it right there. It is a space for feeling. And it is as close as I can say to something sacred that I felt. You're holding space for someone's feelings. You're bearing witness to their story, to the worst times of their life. You're celebrating the best times of their life. You are connecting those dots for them, kind of like you said about we don't always think about our culture. And what I said before about kind of the finely crafted novel, a lot of people feel like I'm in this situation or I'm in this relationship or I'm in this pattern of behaviors that I want to stop. And they're not zooming back and they're taking it all upon themselves. And we're able as therapists over time to collaborate with them, right? Improv once again, to create awareness around the story. So for me, therapy was most impactful when I had, issues at work, issues at home, issues in relationships. And over time, I realized how my childhood and my intergenerational whatever, all of that went into play. And then I saw how I was showing up in all of these places. Yes, the boss. I love my boss. But yes, the boss. Yes, the husband. Love my husband. But, things. But what was I doing? Because the through line there was me. I was the character that was writing. And once you can see it, then you can change it, right? So I would be like, oh, that's me again. Once again, me. Also me, making the same mistakes or decisions because, relationships are very patterned behaviors. Yeah, so it's all of those things. And it's helping people see those patterns and connections to get unstuck, to define what they even want. I keep doing this, I know it's a podcast, touching sort of the bone between, my breastbone. Sometimes as women, we don't even know what it is that we do want. So before we try to go after it, we want to identify what that is. And you can really help someone do that in therapy through conversation.
I think what's interesting though as well, and this is probably on your journey, you've been doing this for a while now, is really starting with looking inward and seeing these patterns. Because I think as a therapist, you're the third person, if you will. You get to look, in a way, you're kind of like meditation, you get the distance.
Yes.
People can get the distance from themselves. And so what is that like being on the other side, having done the work obviously on self to be able to then support others?
Well, it's interesting you say that because that would have been another inflection point I could have mentioned because so I graduated from social work school. I had worked in television, I worked for David Letterman, as you said, knew that I could talk to, basically a rock from, Madonna to the boy who ate a piece of cheese and made it look like a state of the United States. And that was kind of my superpower. I know you love that term and I do too, but I also had the empathy and things like that. So then when I went to social work school, I graduated and my first real job was doing presentations and trainings. So here I thought I was going to be a therapist, but I was leading groups and giving life skills trainings to young people. And basically there I was, right? Communication with the theory and all the things. And I was taking information, topics, and making them clear and engaging. I tried every presentation I did. I produced it. I had a clip and an activity and a joke, because, laughter is the best way for people sometimes to remember information. And so I ended up not being a therapist. I worked in an agency, a domestic violence agency, where, as you said, where I answered the hotline, and every training I did, someone came up to me after and wanted to process themselves, their sister, their cousin, their brother, their uncle, but I really wasn't clinical until the pandemic. And then I was in my most consistent therapy because I didn't cancel because it was virtual and I was stuck at home living with my entire family. And I really went to consistent therapy every week. And that's where I started to really make those connections. And I had kind of given up on the idea of being a therapist. I was like, oh, well, this is what I'm meant to do, right? I'm meant to use my social work and my communication skills to be a presenter, trainer, facilitator. And then all of a sudden I was like, I wanted to once again evolve, to pivot, another chapter of my life. And I decided to leave the agency and start private practice. And what I've learned, and didn't connect until I started preparing for this podcast, is that it's just another form of communication. It is improv. It is that back and forth. It's definitely talking less and listening more, but it kind of all ties together. And, I'm a lifelong learner and I'm very curious, and I enjoy people. So it's really fascinating. It's exciting. I'm almost 60, and it's exciting to be basically starting a new chapter, right? My friend's mother has this theory, late mother had this theory about the decades. Like every decade we do something else. And the fact that at 59, I was starting my next decade felt really powerful.
What I noticed is, again, communication's the through line, but I think what's interesting is maybe, facilitating and doing those presentations was looking more collective. So at a larger group,
yes,
we're going into one-on-one, these more intimate conversations. And I think that's really interesting when you look at your background historically. I'm curious because you did do work in the domestic violence. Like, are you now, as you're practicing one-on-one, are you dealing with patients like that? And as someone who is, a very positive person, like being in that space for you to then be able to go and support, people in that space.
I'm not. I don't really have a specialty yet. I don't see children. That would be and I don't see couples. I might have a spouse come in for a couple of sessions but I've really been focusing on individual psychotherapy. My youngest client was 13 and my oldest, I think currently, is 82. And that is because I'm new at it. So I wanted to kind of try everything, because I do like, and I do relate to all types of people, men, women, and regender, all of it. Everybody's story. I mean, that is part of the work. Everybody has such a powerful story. And that's where the toxic positivity is not helpful. Because yes, you can believe in them and you can want the best for them and you can lean into their strengths. But sometimes you just have to, like I said, bear witness to the really tough parts. But even like in the fields of domestic violence, we called what we did client-defined advocacy. So basically what that meant is you are the expert on your own life. You know what you have to be afraid of. You know why you're staying, because that was always the biggest question. Why don't they just leave? I get that all the time. Survivors of domestic violence are the most wily, strong, smart people that are making the best decisions. The first thing we'd say to them is how brave of you to come here or call, how smart you are that you have survived all this time. Look at you, you're still here. And so then cultivating those strengths, defining what they want to do. Some people we're never going to leave those relationships. And that was not for me to say. And if they felt judgment or an ultimatum on my part, they'd never come back. So the idea is to keep those open lines of communication, once again, supportive, engaging, empowering, right? They have somebody already who's disempowering them. So we wanted to empower them. It's your choice. What do you want to do? And then how can we help you do it? Is it trauma work, or is it housing, or is it a job, or is it opening a bank account, right? any of those types of things, meeting the client really where they were. But yeah, it's cumulative, and people have asked me that actually over the holiday, it's a holiday week right now. How do I manage to kind of leave it at the office? And I've not been doing as great a job, candidly. And I tend to feel it in my back because we all have our places. So I'm going to work on that.
So it's interesting, as you said, this is your next chapter, and I think, which is the one-on-one. Do you have any thoughts? Is this sort of going to unfold organically? What are you imagining as you build out your practice and do this kind of work?
I feel like it's going to take a while to get really good at it. I mean, I think I have the basic skills and the license, the training, but I'm learning every day. I use a variety of modalities. I think it all starts with the relationship, and that's the part that I feel pretty comfortable with, and the communication piece. But I am continuously researching modalities, right? So if I'm with somebody and we've done kind of the unpacking of the issue, but we get to a stuck point within the therapy, I'm going to try to figure out how to get us unstuck, right? It's my job to be the container. They can trust me that they don't have to figure it all out themselves. And sometimes you try something and it doesn't work, right? Some people are really into mindfulness. Some people, you try to get them to breathe. And when they're anxious, they feel it in their chest. So that's not going to work. You have to pivot and find something else to focus on. Sound, senses, right? Some people they want homework. Some people don't want homework. So once again, it's meeting the person where it's not my agenda. I'm throwing out options for them. But yeah, I guess I see it evolving. I am in a joint office space with two dear colleagues who you know. So we'll see what happens there. And I'd love to do groups because that kind of goes back to that facilitator. I was running a caregiver support group very briefly, and that was great. And I learned a lot. You know, I do a deep dive into any subject. I took some notes, but then you got to throw it away and just be present. So we'll see. And that's kind of the exciting part of it. I'm creating it as I go.
You just made a comment, though, about modalities. So, like, what sort of modalities are you using? I mean, you suggested some, but like more specifically in the social work context or psychotherapy.
Well, like I said, it all begins with a relationship, and that means a lot of things. Unconditional positive regard, right? So I am always going to be someone who is going to meet you with respect and believe in you. Then the next phase is you're using what's happening in the room. So once again, going back to acting or improv or storytelling or, you know, meaning making, if you cancel a bunch of times, we're going to talk about it, right? Because behaviors are expressing feelings, right? So you start crying at a certain point. I want to ask you why that moment made you cry. So all of those things that are happening in the room, like, in vivo, live, and in color, those are really important moments. But for some people, yes, skills are very important. So there's something called dialectical behavioral therapy that I'm dipping my toe in, and that is very skill based. And honestly, the more I've looked into it, it's just kind of like how to be a human being. It's mindfulness, it's relational, and it's skills, right? So just one of the simplest ones I could explain is they talk about wise mind. Almost in every modality, you kind of have this idea of you have the id, like the very highly emotional, reactive, I'm touching my lower stomach sort of part of yourself, the child, the I want it now, the reactive. Then above you, you have sort of the judgmental, over intellectualizing. And in the middle, you have that really wise mind or wise, loving adult. And we want to be operating from that perspective. Another thing I've really become interested in is internal family systems, which it basically speaks to the fact that we all are made up of parts. The person who created it was working with actual family systems. And what he realized was that within all of us, we have different parts of us that are playing roles, playing parts. When we're children, some of those parts are amplified and valued, like with me, the talker, the entertainer, and some parts are exiled because they don't serve the family system or nobody wants to hear it. And what happens to those exiled parts is they keep getting louder and louder. And then the other part of internal family systems that I find really interesting is to keep those parts at bay, there are managers that come in. So there are two types of managers. There's ones that are like the overfunctioners, the super organized, the people pleasers. I'm raising my hand, all of those things. And those are very socially accepted, but they're still keeping the parts of us that we don't want to deal with at bay. And then there are the firefighters, and the firefighters, just as it sounds like, they come out and they're not managing, they're putting out the fire. So that's addiction, anger, more less desirable social behaviors, right? So how can we integrate all of those parts of us? They all have value. They were exiled for a reason, but they play a role, or maybe they played a role for us when we were a child and we really needed them. And how can we integrate them into what IFS calls the self with an uppercase S, that is creative and compassionate and collaborative and all of the things that we all want to do, kind of like that wise adult, right? That wise-minded, loving adult.
It's interesting, as a family member, as a mother, as a child, all of that.
Right.
Take a moment to think about that and the meaning behind what you just suggested. It's like, wow, I'm raising my hand. That's me. That's me.
Right. And if you focus awareness on it, then you can change it, right? Because, we all have those dialogues that we play out with our children, with our parents, with our partners, with our and you're saying the same things and doing the same things and getting the same result. I'm not going to use that definition of crazy joke, but it is true. And it's like, if you don't notice it, what's at play here? What's going on? And then you can try to change it. And then it takes practice. Nothing happens like that. These patterns of beliefs, relationships, they are very entrenched and ingrained, right? And they work for us maybe for a while, and then they don't. And then we have to figure out another way. But the first step is awareness.
And so I think it's really interesting as we think about what you're talking about, of how do you take these patterns? So you learn this, you have this sense of self-awareness, and suddenly you want to get unstuck. So you see it, but how do you change it? And so I think that I would imagine that's an interesting part of your job, which is unstucking people, helping people get unstuck.
Yes. And it's funny, that's another skill that I didn't mention before in the relational psychotherapy, is confrontation, which sounds like such a word. We want the positive regard, and we want to be warm, we want to hold space. But you know what? If you tell me I want to stop doing this and I did it, I am there to point out that stuck point for you. I am there to point out, I'm not going to do it in session one, right? I'm going to wait till I've listened to you for a while, and then I'm going to say, you said you wanted to be closer to your sister, and then you did this thing to take you farther apart from your sister, whether you withdrew, whether you were confrontation, or aggressive or whatever it is. And I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm saying you say you want to do this, but you're actually doing this, right? So, and then what happens is, hopefully, people start to notice it for themselves. Like I said, I noticed how I was showing up at work, in relationships, at home, within my own self, right? My own self-talk. And, oh yeah, that's me again, and me again. That's me, So once you notice it, that doesn't mean you can automatically change it, right? And also, one thing I've really been thinking about recently, especially with behaviors that people want to stop, whether it's drinking too much, too much TV time or too much Instagram or whatever it is, what is the function of the behavior? Because like I said before, behaviors are also communication. We're telling the world and ourselves, so are we numbing out? Right? Is there something we're avoiding? Is it, because behaviors can have different functions, right? It can be an addiction, but it could also be, I don't want to feel this right now, or I'm bored, right? We always say about kids, you're not bored. You're just, it's another word for I'm sad or I'm lonely. So I think that we're giving voice and we're questioning them on things they're doing automatically over and over again, to unspool the thread, the ball of yarn, and make those connections. So then we can look at it together and then start practicing it. And then the week to week is, I did it. I didn't do it. I did it and I felt this way. I didn't do it this time. Sometimes people will say, it's my favorite moment. sounds very about me, but I thought of you this week when I didn't do that thing, right? Oh, you would have laughed because I did it again, and that feels really amazing. And that's that connection.
Are you a big believer in the 21 days of, behavior change of being, if you do something for 21 days, you can change?
I am a big believer in anything that works for you. I don't read a lot of self-help books. I was raised on Oprah Winfrey, and what I liked is, and sort of is in alignment with what I ended up doing. Not that I'm like Oprah Winfrey, but she would take these big books and information, she'd digest it with her producers, and then she'd give it to the audience in ways we could all have three takeaways, right? That's where I learned about Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou, and I'm trying to think of other people that didn't turn out to be, Louise Hay and all of those people. So, and I think any formula, like I said about the modalities in therapy, I'll try anything that someone is interested in, but it's kind of what connects to you. So if 21 days works for someone, and having a plan and a book to follow, great. Some people don't like that, right? Some people are really about doing it great for 2 days and falling in the hole for a day. And then that's how they learn and they get up. So it's really whatever works for the person.
And I only brought that up because it's just been a saying that I've heard just in some of the wellness things we've done, which is if you practice something and you do it for 21 days, you're more likely to be able to build that new habit or routine into your life. And I think
that makes sense, right? Practice and repetition and patterns. It's creating a new pattern instead of
exactly that was sort of yeah, so I threw it out there. And also to your point of, getting unstuck,
Yeah.
But, I'm curious. I mean, our theme is Women's March for Mental Wellness. How are you marching for mental wellness?
Well, I mean, I think I am really, these are things I've been interested in my whole life. And I'm really walking the walk now. In a way, I talked the talk for many years. And I don't mean that that I wasn't doing anything, but I was literally talking. And now I'm listening a lot more. I'm learning a lot more. I think I am using my natural skills, the state of flow with this. Not only am I curious and empathic, but I'm also very authentic, right? And if I don't know something, I'll say I don't know it. I'm not trying to be like too cool for school, and I'm able to meet people where they are. So like I said, that wide variety of clients, especially women of different ages, from teenagers through octogenarians. I'm really trying to show up for them in a way that makes them feel seen, heard, and validated in their experience and why they are the way they are and where they are, and then trying to help them move forward. But empowering them, like I said, not about my agenda, about theirs. And that's hard. That is very hard as a psychotherapist. When you see, I've talked about this recently with my colleagues, someone who wants to terminate treatment, I would rather leave the door open. I mean, yes, we want to discuss it if possible. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes people just leave. That's a behavior that's speaking volumes too. We either got too close or to a nerve, but also celebrating that piece of work that we did together, right? So if you don't want to come back anymore, I don't want to make you feel bad about that. I want to leave that door open. I want to let you know that you're in charge. Celebrate what we did together, even if it was 2 sessions, right? Something powerful happened in those 2 sessions, and remind them that wellness and mental health is a practice that continues lifelong, right? It's social, it's physical, it's emotional, and I'm there for them when they want to come back, right? It's not about me, it's about them.
Going back to what's really interesting is I think if we look at the wave historically, it's about me, the clinician or the therapist, and my point of view. Now to it becoming more about them, like what is it, meeting them where they are, and
yeah,
really,
well, yeah, like I said, it's not the medical model. It's not you're sick and I'm well, right? We don't even call them patients. We call them clients, right? They've hired us to work with them to help them figure out. As social workers, we call them clients. I mean, if they're in a hospital, we'll call them a patient.
What's interesting is that it's not about, back to then physicians, or clinicians or social workers, about your point of view, your education, your knowledge, meeting your clients where they are, I think is really interesting.
Right.
And the one word I wanted to bring up again, and then I'll hand it back to you, is authenticity. Because if you're meeting
Yes.
someone where they are, you have to be authentic and in the moment.
So what I did want to say before, because you did jog my memory by saying that, is it's yeah, we're not the doctors on high. You're not the patient and you're not lying down on a couch and I'm going to interpret your dreams. I mean, merit to some of that, I'm sure, but it's we're in this together. And I'm also not a blank slate. In strict psychotherapy, I don't work that way. And sometimes someone telling you a story about what happened over the weekend or how nasty their roommate was, and you go, you make a dramatic face, you're feeling it with them. You're with them on it. And I really believe that took me a while, because you do learn in school. There are some practitioners who are very, strictly psychoanalytic, and we're a mirror and we don't show any emotion or whatever. But I feel like if you're on the ride with me, for some people, I am a sister. I'm playing a role of a sister. I'm playing the role of a daughter. I'm playing the role of a mother, a wife, not really, but there's flavors of that. So I'm leaning into that, what's actually happening and what they need the relationship to be. So you have to be real, and authentic is definitely the word. And people can spot it if you're not. If you're trying to be like, tell me more about that. We all have that stereotype of a therapist. And I mean, I'm sure there's some people that want that, but they probably won't come to me, for psychotherapy.
Well, I think of just my one personal experience back in my mid-20s. I went to a therapist. I just remember this, living in New York, and I went into this, and the guy just sat there and he just literally bobbled his head. And it was like I was talking to myself. So my reason for bringing that up is, I would imagine that being in that space with your clients and feeling them with them and understanding them would be just a really much more helpful approach to getting them to where they want to go. And so I think it's a good thing. I think, real time, being in that moment and present is really important. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I think that's amazing.
And going back to what you said, the first question I ask everybody when they come to me is, have you ever been in therapy before? How was it? What did you like? What didn't you like? I'll try not to do that, right? And I've had a lot of people say that. I just talked and talked and talked. Now, sometimes when the people come in and they say, I just talked and talked and talked, and they didn't say it, you learn in about 3 sessions. I was probably this way in therapy in the beginning, because I would wait till it built up so much that I just wanted to dump it, get it all out in the first 3 sessions. It's hard sometimes to get a word in edgewise, but that's your job. Your job is to jump in, especially if someone has said, I don't want you to let me talk and talk and talk. It's your job to jump in, make connections, ask questions, call BS, all of those things. So it's a really good point.
Well, I think, and you just hit on something, which is making connections. It's connecting the dots in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I think the other thing that just in this conversation, which has been fascinating to me, is connecting the dots from modalities, from lived experiences. Like there's so many different types of dots you have to connect.
Yes.
Thoughts on that?
I think the reason therapy is so interesting is because everything is grist for the mill, right? Like I said, if I make a face that you don't like, that might be something we talk about. You might feel judged about it. Or pop culture. I mean, I'm a big pop culture girl. I'll bring in, if someone wants to talk about an episode of a TV show that meant something to them, that's cool. When I used to do trainings, we would use a lot of media. Media is really marketing, and media and advertising. We're all impacted by that. So what are the images and messages you've received about that? So really anything is, more and more people are like coming in and want to read you text messages or share an Instagram quote that was inspiring to them, that made them think of the work, a TikTok or something like that. And I think that's all, that's the creativity and the flow and the improv of it. You're just kind of going where it goes, as long as it's in service of the client. And sometimes what they want is to laugh with you at a TikTok video. That's connection. That makes them feel like you get them. A lot of people are lonely, especially post-COVID. It's, people are lonely. People have lost a lot of the we call them third spaces, right? We used to have work, home, and then some other space that you went that had nothing to do with your job or your family, but it was someplace you felt connected, whether it was a house of worship or your bowling league, and people lost a lot of those things. So sometimes a lot of what we're doing in the room is we're just having that human connection, which is so powerful. And especially if it's about something that's emotional. I'll just bring in one media reference. So I just saw Wicked, like probably many people. And it really struck me that I've heard there's a theory behind this, which I don't know, but as a person, I always know I don't cry in a movie or a book when the bad thing is happening. I cry after the bad thing has happened and two people are seeing each other. And there's that connection of, I know this was hard for you and I believe in you. So, when Galinda and Elphaba come together, right? That because I knew you, or any of those moments where one character or one person, one mother, one friend sees your pain, bears witness to it, and just that makes it feel so much better, is so beautiful. And that is the power of human connection.
We are coming to a close. I have one last question, which is, this is your platform to give women all around the world, all ages, all backgrounds, all cultures, a message. What do you want to leave them with, Leslie?
I love the idea that you always talk about superpowers, right, of women. And one superpower that we have, both because I think it's instinctual and also because it has been thrust on us by society and the patriarchy and all of that, is being caretakers and nurturers. And I think that the beauty of that is that if you can take care of other people, guess what? You can take care of yourself. True disclosure, I pulled my back out yesterday. Well, I knew just what to do for myself to take care of myself, right? We always think about it as taking care of others, but we can turn that and nurture ourselves, right? We can cook ourselves a meal. We can reach out to a friend, all of those things that we instinctively know how to do because we've been trained to do it for other people. So I really believe in that. I also believe in self-care, referred to as something that has to do with your soul, not your role, right? Because I think self-care has been kind of co-opted by the beauty industry, honestly. And it's not about, for you, maybe getting your nails done. I know people, but it's also about anything that makes you feel more like you. And also, I believe in the communal nature of women, right? The beauty of the sisterhood, the idea that real self-care is not only taking care of yourself, but it's taking care of each other. And that is a superpower that women have and can share, right? So we're all these nurturers and these caretakers. Well, what if we turn that towards each other, right? Share a meal, share a laugh, share a cry, right? And mentor younger women, learn from older women, hang out with peers, laugh, cry, all of those things, right? A quote that I just saw before we started this podcast on my colleague's wall, I thought kind of speaks to this. I don't know who said it. So, sadness shared is divided and joy shared is multiplied, right? That's what it is. Isn't that? I know.
That's
I literally went to get a pen and I saw this on her wall, right? So A, I learned that from a colleague, and B, isn't that beautiful, right? We share the burdens and we also celebrate the victories, and we can care for each other, right? We can turn that burden of society of being the nurturer and the caretaker into our best asset and reap the benefits ourselves.
Wow, thank you. That is just amazing. A word came to mind just listening to you, which is soul care, self-care to soul care. And I think you're absolutely right. Women have giant shoulders, are so busy taking care of everybody else but themselves. And and step up and soul care. So, Leslie, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for getting under the hood with me and for sharing your inspiring journey.
Thank you so much for having me. And what you do is so inspiring too. Really, really powerful, and happy to be a part of it.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.